In this full-length tutorial, I'm going to show you how to paint this pretty rose using student quality paints. Even if you have no experience, you can join in with this tutorial because we even provide you with a free outline to trace down. So let's get started. If you follow me on social media, you'd have heard me talk about these Sennelier student quality paints. They were on sale at Jackson's, and so I recommended them to my followers over on Facebook and on Instagram. And I'm going to be using these today to show you how I painted this rose. And of course, if you want to join in, you don't have to use these paints. You can use whichever paints that you have within your own kit. I always do a colour chart, as you can see here. I use these a lot to match my colours up, and I mix the paints like this using a mid-tone, light tone and a dark tone, and they're set out in the way that they are set out within the set here. And I use these to match my paints, and there's a video on the top of the screen which explains how I do it in a little more detail. I've done the outline of my rose from a printout like this, and I scribble on the back and just trace it down the old school way, just outlining it so that I've got a clean outline to work from, and I'll provide you with a free traceable. These are the brushes that I'm going to be using: number 4 spotter, which has a stubby little bristle, my number 2 pointed round, this is Snowdrop range from Rosemary & Co, and again a pointed tip, and my little eradicator brush. I have a ceramic palette here that I'm going to be mixing my paints on, again from Jackson's, and I'm going to be using some masking fluid today, which I haven't used for a very long time, and we'll see how I got on with that a bit later. I'm using Arches Rough Quality 300 GSM paper for today's tutorial because I believe a good quality paper is works really well with lesser quality paints. So use the best quality paper that you can afford. That's where your money should go if you're on a tight budget. So use the best that you can. I've put down my masking fluid like this, and we need to let it dry. These are going to form the center part of the flower like this, so we need to let that dry 100% before we can do anything else. So let's start by putting our first wash on. So to begin with, I'm using the rose madder, and I'm mixing it to a thick consistency and a watery consistency here in these little tiny palettes that you can see. I'm also mixing a little bit of orange and burnt sienna there, as you can see me swatching out these colors here. Watercolor is all about building up your colors slowly and carefully. So if you're new to watercolor painting and you've treated yourself to these paints, you can join in with me, and I'm using my number 4 spotter. Now, if you don't know about spotter brushes, they have a stubbier bristle to regular brushes, and they are really great if you're new to watercolor painting because it means that you can kind of use them sort of in the way that you would use a felt tip pen. It kind of gives you full control. All the brushes that I use are synthetic. These are all from Rosemary & Co, and all of the materials I'm going to be using I will link in the description box underneath this video. You can see me here adding the mixture of orange and burnt sienna to the center and letting it gently bleed into that wet paint that I've just applied. Notice how watery the paint is at this stage. This is just a watered down version of rose madder, and I'm just applying it to the areas that you can see here, pretty much all over the rose, and this will form the lightest color that is underneath the darker values that you can see. So if you are new to watercolor painting, it's all about building up your layers slowly, making sure that each layer is dry before you apply the next. And we always have that kind of tricky phase with watercolor, so I highly recommend that you watch this video all the way through so that you can see that tricky process unfold. Notice how I'm using my spotter brush to push that pigment into the pencil line. When watercolor dries, it retracts and it will pull away from that pencil line. That's unavoidable, but you can just use the tip of your brush. The paint is still damp, so I'm dropping in some more rose madder on the tips of the rose like this. Notice how it now blurs into that damp paper, giving a lovely soft blurry outside edge. So as I said at the start of this video, if you're using inexpensive paints or student quality paints, if you're using them with a good quality paper, and it doesn't have to be super expensive like Arches, it could be something like the Etcher paper that I've recommended in the past. Etcher do a really good quality 50% cotton paper that you could try, and again I highly recommend it. So I'm doing this process, I'm repeating this process on the other petals, using my spotter brush to pull that pigment in. And this is the darker value of the rose madder. By darker value, I just mean it has less water and more pigment. Notice the strength of the pigment here and let it drop into that damp paper. Because I'm using this rough surface paper today, it is more absorbent, and therefore it gives me a little bit more leeway and a bit more time to add that colour. If you're using a different type of paper that isn't 100% cotton, you may have to work a little bit faster, or you may have to re-wet your paper to get this effect. Or alternatively, you could just work one petal at a time. The important thing is to get your paint on the paper, making sure that each layer is thinly applied and dry before applying the next. I've switched to my number 2 pointed round. Again, this is synthetic and it has a finer tip than the spotter, and I'm able to apply it like this and just put my paint directly onto the dry paper. And you'll notice I've got a clean puddle of water on my palette here to clean my brush, pat it dry, and then blend it in. And I'll repeat that process until that paint is blended into the existing paper. I do have a particular method of applying my paint, and I have talked about this in more detail on the video on the top of your screen now, so if you want to click through to that and watch it later on, where I sort of describe in a bit more detail how to apply watercolour in the way that I'm showing you here. Over on this channel we have a learn to paint as you paint approach, so it's kind of teaching you how to paint as you go through your painting. So this time I'm using the violet colour that you can see me pointing to there. That's the cobalt violet hue, I think it's called, and just blending it through like this with my brush using the method that I've just discussed with you. This little palette here, this is my new one. I've just bought this from Jackson's. It was about £15, I think, I'm not sure. I'll link it in the description. It's made out of ceramic, so it doesn't stain, and of course because you have these tiny little wells, it means that you don't overmix your paint and throw it away, although they are quite small. Great for this kind of painting. This is the yellow ochre, and just letting that purple paint drop into that colour there, and yellow ochre in the middle over the stamen and anther like that. And this is the mixture of burnt sienna with a tiny bit of orange and a little bit of yellow ochre, going back to that other mix of the purple and the rose, and I'm applying this over this section here. Now at the start of this video I mentioned that we provide you with a photograph to work from, as well as an outline, a simple outline, and there are a couple of ways that you can obtain that, and so let's just take a look. We have a couple of ways that you can access our free reference photos and line drawings. We have our very own private Facebook group, and as a member you will have access to all of them here. But in case you're not a Facebook fan, there's another way that you can access them, which I'll tell you about in a moment, but do consider joining us. We are a wonderful, friendly group, and you can post your finished paintings as well as your work in progress and have some feedback from me and our other incredible members. You can see here some of the completed works in our student gallery, and having positive feedback is such an amazing confidence booster and a great way to learn. So if this is something that interests you, I've put a link in the description box underneath this video. But if Facebook really isn't for you, then don't worry, because I will put the reference photo and the line drawing right at the end of this video so that you can pause, screenshot, and you can print it out that way. We want art to be accessible to everyone, so join in and have fun. All of our YouTube tutorials are full length, so join us, join in, and become one of our watercolour wonders. Okay, so I'm mixing the green tones that we have within that particular set. It's the two green colours that we have, the deep green, and I think it's called green yellow, and I've mixed them together, and I've applied the deep green on its own to have that bluish hue on the top of the leaf, and the yellow green on the bottom, which I've mixed with a tiny bit of that darker green. So just taking it down the stem, wet on dry, using my spotter brush, right to the tip, and now I'm dropping in a tiny bit of the residual purple on the right hand side only. So straight on with the deep green to begin with. It has this lovely bluish hue. If you don't have these paints and you have other colours, you could use something like a Windsor green or a Windsor green blue shade to create the same sort of colour. Now you don't have to use these paints, of course, if you want to join in with this tutorial. You will invariably have the same colours within your own set, and if you are having difficulty matching up your colours, let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to help you so that you can join in with us. So gently dropping in that purple tone on the outside edge here. This paint is still damp, so going back to my rose madder and the burnt sienna mix here, just a nice thick consistency now, adding a tiny bit of purple as well, and I'm just dropping this in over the masking fluid and just letting that settle into the paint that I've applied already. So you can see how we're building up these colours. The masking fluid is now dry and I'm beginning to remove it with the tip of the eraser that's on my mechanical pencil. Now, if I'm absolutely honest with you, I should have let it dry a little bit better. So I'm not sure whether I did it right. So if you can give me any tips on how to use it properly, then drop them in the comments below. I think I should have left it dry. I think I took it off too quickly. But ordinarily, you want to make sure that everything's absolutely dry there before you remove your masking fluid. And you saw the colours that I was mixing up there, mixture of the rose madder with a little bit of purple and a little bit of that ultramarine. Now that everything's dry, I put this on wet and wet, that sort of purpley tone, so we still have that beautiful rose madder at the top, dropping in that other colour and letting it blur into the existing wash, adding rose madder to that purple tone and dropping it in wet and wet as we did on the first wash here. Now at this point, you'll notice that you can still see the underlying wash. It's completely dry, and so by dropping this other subsequent wash on the top and applying these colours in this way, you can see that you've got that beautiful natural blur of the colours that you're adding to begin to form those patterns. You can still see the wash underneath that we applied at the very start. This is how you get this beautiful soft pattern on these petals, by dropping in the colour and letting that paint just gently merge into the wet wash. You can see that by adding that blue tone, it's giving it something a little bit different, and it's making it stand out and making it look a little bit more realistic. Continuing the process on the other petals and just dropping in that purple tone. Remember, you don't have to be too precious with your colour matching, it's just a case of making your colours a little bit different from each other. Adding a tiny bit more purple and a tiny bit more pink, so that's the rose madder and the purple colour that you can see, dropping them in. If you don't have rose madder and you're using a different set of paints, you could use something like a permanent rose and any purple tone that you've got. And of course, if you want to draw your drawings freehand, you're very welcome to do that. But over on our channel here, we like to just press on with the watercolour painting. Because this paper stays damp for longer, as I've said earlier on, it gives me more of an opportunity to drop in that paint, but if you're using different paper, you may need to go in a little bit quicker to do that. Same process on the other petals, just applying that colour there, and I'm adding a tiny bit of the yellow ochre to the base of this colour of this petal because I felt that it had this kind of yellowy hue. Rose madder here, just mixed up with a tiny bit of purple and just carrying on that process. If you're new here, we release brand new content every single Tuesday. If you haven't already subscribed, you may want to consider doing so and also hitting that little bell notification. That way you won't miss new content every Tuesday. All our videos are full length, they're completely free. So if you are enjoying this, could I ask you to please give me a huge thumbs up? It's a way of letting YouTube know that you like me. You can see me here just dropping in that purple tone along with the yellow ochre on that base petal there and yellow ochre on the folded petal at the top. I've mixed a tiny bit of the ultramarine and I'm applying this to the top part here. Now by adding this really pale wash of ultramarine, it really does give this something really, really special, and you can see when this dries, it will add another dimension to your painting. I apply this colour here and there along with a watered down wash of that purpley tone, and you can see me here just dropping in that pink that we mixed earlier on to create these little bits of patterns on the petal. Now, all of our videos here on YouTube are free and we launch every single Tuesday, as I've already mentioned. But if botanical painting is something that really interests you and you want exclusive content, you may want to take a look at our Patreon, where I launch brand new videos every month that you will not find here on YouTube. They are exclusive to my patrons and without those pesky ads. In case this is something that interests you, let's just take a look. If you love botanical painting and want to know more, then you may want to join our Patreon. We have different membership levels so that you can take your botanical painting to the next level. With our Clematis level, you will have a full-length, in-depth tutorial every month, and if you'd like to make even more progress, then check out our Rose level, where we now have a mentorship offering feedback to help you grow. You won't find any of our Patreon tutorials here on YouTube, and you can cancel your membership at any time. So if you want to take your botanical painting to the next level, then take a look. I'll put the link in the description underneath this video. So as I said, you won't find any of the tutorials that are on Patreon over on YouTube. They are exclusive for my patrons, and you can join up and leave at any time. Adding the this is yellow ochre to the base here, and you can see that beautiful blue tone has made a difference. Once again, everything's dry, and so just carrying on the process, mixing the colours that you can see me picking up on my palette here. So notice now that I'm using my brush wet on dry, picking up that pigment and adding it to this little folded petal here, but you can still see the underlying wash coming through there. Just carrying on the process and building up the layers one by one. So I wanted to make this tutorial to show you that you don't always have to buy the best quality paints to get a fairly decent painting. Just adding a little bit of that rose madder to that little curved bit there, patting my brush dry, picking up some pigment directly from the palette and adding some detail to this dry little folded petal, as you can see here. Continuing the process, flitting from one part to the other. This is rose madder that I'm using here just to paint a few details on this section and blending it through with my damp brush. Applying the water and the same process as before. Adding some rose madder again to that thicker petal, and that has a bit of the purple tone. If you are wondering why I clean my brush in the little puddle on my palette and not my jar, it just means that the water doesn't sort of run down the ferrule of the brush and make it bloom onto the paper. If I were to clean my brush in my water jar, I'll find that the water runs down that metal part and lands on paper, which is really frustrating. Having a tiny puddle of water in my palette, it means that I have full control. So you saw me there mixing a little bit of burnt sienna with the violet colour and just dropping this in over that dry wash. Make sure that everything's dry when you're adding your detail and just letting it blend through with my damp brush as before. When you do your blending, make sure that you clean your brush, pat it on the kitchen paper and then blend, because otherwise you'll have too much water on your brush and the same thing will happen again. Okay, next stage, let's get on to these leaves. Same colours as before, the two greens that are in the palette there, and I'm mixing one with a tiny bit of blue and a tiny bit of burnt sienna, just to take some of that sort of bluiness out of it. And going over with that darker colour, which is it's dark green with a tiny bit of light green and a tiny bit of burnt sienna. And you can see that I'm just adding some detail here. Now, I didn't want these two leaves to be too detailed. I just wanted to give the illusion of them being there and looking bright and vibrant. And you can see me there, I just outlined the base of that leaf and just pulling in some of the little spiky bits that you can see on the outside and add in some of that lovely luscious green tone, which is of course the green yellow, or the yellow green yellow with a tiny bit of that darker value there, and outlining the outside edge on the right hand side of the stalk with a little bit of darker value green. And I'm going to be dropping in some of the purple once it's just settled into the paper, just to sharpen up that outside edge. You can see me here just picking up that purple and just patting it with my number 2 round brush there. Notice how you have that darker value on the outside edge and sharpening up that outside edge just to make it really stand out. So of course this is now dry, going in with that darker green tone and the lighter green tone and just merging them together and just kind of having a little bit of fun with it. And I really like the look of this, and you can see that beautiful colour underneath. Blending it through as I would ordinarily do, and just adding that bluer tone, that bluey green tone at the top. I really like the effect this has given, and you can see those beautiful colours now merging together. Everything's dry, so I'm just adding a little bit of detail here with that darker green tone that I've mixed, just adding a few veins. So if you are enjoying this video and you'd like to see more tutorials like this using these paints, let me know in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, so these colours now, we are back to the burnt sienna with a tiny bit of that purple. So I'm just going over the areas that I masked off now by dropping in that pigment. So we have burnt sienna. I think I added a little bit of orange to that colour just to brighten it up a little bit, and just blending it in. If I'm absolutely honest, I don't think I needed to use the masking fluid. I bought some and I wanted to try it out, but I think it was user error. So if you are used to using masking fluid and I used it wrong, let me know in the comments. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm back to this little petal here, and I'm just using that wet paint, and I'm going to be dropping in a tiny bit more pigment of that watered down version of the Rose Madder. Now you'll see that I'm painting over that blue tone that I applied, but you can still see that gorgeous paint coming through. So you have on these 2 top petals here, you have that lovely yellow ochre at the base, that beautiful ultramarine on the top, and now that pinky tone. They almost have a kind of raspberry ripple look about them, and I'm really happy at the way this turned out. So just dropping in that colour, this is Rose Madder, and onto the wet paint to give those beautiful patterns. Adding a bit of detail on this folded over section here. This is Rose Madder on its own. Just adding this little curve and blending it through. The dark colour that you can see here is a mixture of purple, burnt sienna, and also a tiny bit of the grey colour there, and you can see me just painting around and adding some detail to the stamen and anther. I think at this point I realised that by applying that masking fluid at the start, it really did help me a little bit. I could have negatively painted around them. I think it's something I'm used to doing, is just painting negatively around shapes to create a shape. But actually, when I got to this point, I realised that it was maybe a good idea to use it after all. I don't know. On the fence with masking fluid. What are your views on it? I know that sometimes it can stick to the paper, and I think it was user error, as I said. I think I should have waited a little bit longer for it to dry. I'm using my eradicator brush here just to soften out some of those hard edges, which is really great for doing that. Just use it damp, and just using this greyish tone that I've mixed up with the purple, just to enhance some of the detail here and there. So this is the eradicator brush that I've just been talking about, and I'm using it damp just to lift out some colour here and there, and I'm also using it to lift out some negative space. So I'm just lifting out some of that colour that I've applied because I wanted to create a little bit more interest and a little bit more drama. So just patting it dry like this, and you can see how easy it is to lift off this paint, but just a little bit of pressure and just painting and just pressing it with some kitchen paper. I also like to enhance my lift outs by applying some paint around the outside, as you saw me doing there, and I'm just wetting down that paint again and dropping in some more pigment to give it a bit more detail. We still have a little way to go on this painting, but I'm going to stop talking and let you watch the rest of it in peace and listen to some soothing music. Remember to stay until the end, where you can pause the video and print out the reference photo and the outline that I'm providing you with, and also you can see the finished painting. I'll also put a playlist up which contains some botanical paintings for you, so if you want to click through, I'll see you there. At this point, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of this painting, whether you've enjoyed it. Let me know if there's something you'd like to see more of using these student quality paints. I'd be interested in your feedback. Thank you once again for watching. Stay until the end, and I'll see you next time.